From our discussion yesterday about the filter above the jar for wine, we got to the whole concept of building a tent. So this is something that in the eyes of the rabbis, halakha is more common than what we think. Meaning that construction of a permanent structure is not very common. You don't do that on Shabbat. But something that looks like a tent is common. For example, the umbrella, a wide-brimmed hat was also mentioned as a possibility. What if you wear a wide-brimmed hat and on top you wear a talit? So it's not just your regular talit; it falls on the sides as if it's a tent. What if you sleep in a bed and you put a canopy to protect from mosquitoes, from the heat? What if you have a paragola? An awning that you open on Shabbat. Sukkah. Yeah. So sukkah that you have to cover from the rain. And so all there are different instances where something that looks like a tent is happening, or opening a huppah on Shabbat. The huppah for a wedding. We don't usually do weddings on Shabbat, but in one of the first synagogues that I served as a rabbi in Kiryat Gat, a Libyan, like people from Tripoli, they there was a hatan within the 7 days, and the gabbai of the synagogue opened the huppah on Shabbat, opened the huppah on 4 poles, and the huppah, and he put the hatan and the kala underneath, and they said the Shabbat brachot after the kiddush. And back in the day, I was in my 20s. I was still, I was sort of hot-headed fanatic. I told him, yes, a little bit. So I said, it's forbidden. It's forbidden to open the ohel. You can't do that, and it's forbidden to say the Shabbat brachot at the Bet Knesset.
They don't know anything about that.
No, they do very well. It was my mistake. I said you're only allowed to say the Shabbat brachot for the wedding where you sit down with the hatan and kala for a meal. You cannot say it in the Bet Knesset. Years later, I found in the book of Minhagim of Libyan Jews by Rabbi Avraham Adadi, who was considered a major posek that Allah, not only in Libya but in all of Algeria and North Africa, he was followed. Rabbi Avraham Adadi from the 16th century. That this is the minhag of Libyan Jews, and it's allowed both to open this chuppah on Shabbat and to say the Shabbat brachot. So I learned to hold my horses and to do better research on everything, whatever minhag I see. First thing that there is probably there is a reason for that.
But allowed only to them because it's their minhag, but it doesn't mean.
Yeah, no, but say it's allowed to them because it's minhag, but it means that technically it's not forbidden. That's the thing.
So if they opened the chuppah outside?
No, it was in the synagogue. But
so
still, but still it's considered, when we speak about that, it doesn't matter where you do it. So,
Rabbi Saba was from Turkey?
Saba?
Yeah.
The original
Not Turkey, I mean Tripoli.
No, the original Saba was from Portugal. Rabbi Ishaq Saba and Rabbi Abraham Saba, and in Arabic, Saba means lion. So it's
Saba.
Right. Mm-hmm. One of the names for a lion. There's Fahad, Saba, and there's another.
Saba with Ayin. I thought with Ayin.
No, it's with Ayin, and then because people couldn't pronounce the guttural became Saba.
The Saba that died in the helicopter.
I don't know if it was related to him, but it could be. But this Saba, Rabbi Ishaq Saba, was the father-in-law of Rabbi Yosef Karo. Rabbi Yosef Karo's first wife was from the Saba family, and probably we spoke about it. He had a major influence in terms of Kabbalah because it was a Kabbalist. Mm-hmm. Anyway, going back to the tent, right, the oil. So Rabbi Yisrael Lipschitz in his book Tiferet Kalkalat Shabbat on Masechet Shabbat, where he explains the laws of Shabbat, he says Gimel Midot Beboneh. There are 3 types of construction: Binyan Bakarka, Oil Kavua, Ve'oil Arai. He says there is a permanent building, that's construction. It's biblically forbidden. Oil Kavua, a tent, a permanent tent. That even if it's not, could be, even if it's not, he says, what is a permanent? And the third is a temporary tent. What is a permanent tent? He explains, it's a tent that is over it should be on the ground, not on let's say if you put something on a bed, it's not called permanent tent, but it has to be there for a while. So, and he says is פחות משמונה או תשעה ימים אפילו בעניין שעה לא הווה רק בעניין עראי וכסוכה. He says that probably it has to be at least 8 or 9 days, and that is because sukkah, we built sukkah for 7 days in Eretz Israel and 8 days out of Eretz Israel, and sukkah is considered by definition temporary. So if sukkah is temporary, that means that 7 or 8 days is still temporary. So it has to be more than that to become permanent. So only if you build a structure that will last 8 or 9 days, it will be temporary. So what is the third category? Oil arai. It says aval oil arai, which is the temporary tent, is one which is not built to last 8 or 9 days, and it says it has two characteristics. One, sha'asui lizman mu'at, that is only built for a short while. ואין בגגו בסמוך לג' טפחים לגגו טפח על טפח ברום טפח. So this is the size that when towards the top of that tent, it is not 4 by 4 inches. It becomes narrower and narrower at the top. So some say that this kind of tent you could do on Shabbat, which is called lechatchila, meaning that it's allowed to do it, and not only in the sense of if you did it, it's okay. No, you're allowed to do it lechatchila. And it says also there are other situations that it says if you're adding to an existing oil, you're opening the awning that's already there, it would be okay. But if even with the temporary tent, they added some prohibitions to limit that because it's so ubiquitous. They say mitkaven lehagen or letzel asur. If your intention is to protect or to create shade, it is forbidden. And also, if there are three walls of that tent or 3 sides of the tent that come all the way down to the ground, and he says according to that. He says, "Yesh lichora le'esor lintot b'Shabbat regen sherm." It seems like one should forbid opening an umbrella on Shabbat. Why say yesh le'esor lichora? It seems as if we should say it's forbidden, and it doesn't go directly to say it's forbidden, because as I mentioned yesterday, the practice among Orthodox Jews in Europe, the widespread practice was to use umbrellas on Shabbat. It was only later on, because of the campaign of some rabbis who were against it, that it became forbidden, and also because of the Sephardic rabbis who were against it, because it was not as needed. Haram, you say, right? It was not as needed in the Middle East as it was needed in Europe, and then it became the rule that umbrella on Shabbat is forbidden, and if you see someone walking with an umbrella on Shabbat, you should stone them to death. No, I'm joking. No, they don't do that. But it's almost that. It's almost that. Yeah. If you go with an umbrella on Shabbat, you have to put down that stone, and walk back with your hands up. So he says, why would it be forbidden? He says this. He brings several arguments. Aleph, 1. Avden mechitzot asher magiot laaretz. On one hand, you would have said that the umbrella, right? It has, let's say, it has walls. Let's see the circumference of the umbrella as a wall, but it doesn't come all the way down to the ground. Even the most fanatic umbrellas that we used to, I don't see them anymore. We used to have transparent umbrellas that would get to half your waist. Remember that? So you could see through them and walk in the rain. So. And the mechitzot, the walls have to go to the ground, and mechitzot tluyot, enan ki mechitzot. So the hanging, those are hanging walls. They're not really all the way to the ground. He says that's only when the purpose of the mechitzot is not to protect you, but because here it's for protection, even though it's hanging up, even though it's not all the way to the ground, maybe it's forbidden. It says also, ואין לומר דבשירים הווה לשיפוע אוהלים דלאו כאוהלים דמה. It says maybe you will argue that it's not a flat tent, it's diagonal and it goes to the side, and that is not considered a tent. It says it brings a proof from the Talmud on Shabbat that it is considered a tent. Now, it says number 3, אין לומר מדמיטלטל על ידי הנושאו הרי כהימנן דאוהל זרוק לאו שמי אוהל. It says you could argue, and that's an argument that was brought by the Hatam Sofer, Rabbi Moshe Sofer of Pressburg. He said that oil zaruk lav shmei oil. There's this statement is mentioned in the Talmud when discussing the laws of purity and impurity. For the purposes of defining purity of when in the vicinity of a dead body, the halacha is that ohel mevi et tum'ah, meaning if you have a dead body and a living person or object or kohen under the same roof, the tum'ah is transferred by being under the same roof. Not only being under the same roof, also with a situation of oil. For example, let's say there's a fence and a tree planted on one side of the fence. But the foliage of the tree goes into the courtyard and into the street. And there's a dead body in the courtyard under the tree. And someone passes under the other side of the tree. Even though he doesn't see the dead body, even though there's a fence in between, the ohel, they are under the same roof, under the foliage of the tree, it becomes tameh. But the Talmud says, ahalot. The Talmud says that ohel zaruk, a portable tent, a portable roof, is not considered a roof. Meaning that, the example that is given, for example, imagine someone walking. Let's say construction workers with the long beam, and they carry it together, and they pass in the street. Under one side of the beam, there's a dead body, and they are carrying the beam. Are they going to be tameh because the beam is one roof that covers both the dead body and themselves? The answer is no. Why? Because it's a carried tent. It's movable. It's portable. It's not permanent. So the Hatam Sofer used this argument about the umbrella as well. He says it's not considered a tent because you carry it. It doesn't stand on its own. He says that's only for the laws of impurity. It is not applicable for Shabbat. And he brings another argument also that has to do with Tumah. He says Gam en ledamot Hashem leoif zugdach shel sukkah. You know what's oif zugdach? Fine. The mutar lepotho, you can't compare it to a certain mechanism that they had for the sukkah, which you were allowed to open and close on Shabbat. That was a cover for the sukkah. That if it would start raining, they would pull it over, especially in Europe, where rain is coming in October, so they would do that. And people, it says, "Hatam kol ha'oel kvar asui." So it says because it's already there and it's built in, so you're not making a new thing. You're only pulling it back and forth on Shabbat, and it's okay. And this is similar to what the Mishna says, Pikak halon, the cover of the window. Remember that we spoke about that in Mishnaic houses in the time of the Mishnah. They didn't have windows; they had openings, an opening in the wall. And at night, they would put a piece of wood that would fit into that hole. Only we actually don't even know that in Bet HaMikdash, the Bible mentions that they had halonei shekufim atumim, which probably means that there were windows that became narrower as they got into the temple. There was the technique of making flat glass screens and putting them as a window. It didn't exist. So the Mishnah says that if you have that cover for the window and it's attached with a chain, you could put it on Shabbat, and that is both for the vertical windows, the ones on the walls, and the ceiling covers, because they also had what today we call Yeah, skylights. So they had skylights to let smoke out, to let air in, but at night they had to cover it. Remember the famous story about Hillel, who goes to hear the drasha, they don't let him in, so he goes on the roof and listens through the skylight, and then it's covered with snow.
Right.
They come in the morning, it's all dark.
Right.
So they found him under the snow. But so that is also allowed on Shabbat, and it's a tent. No, it's not a problem, he says, because it's already attached. But we don't have a similar thing in the Mishnah. It says, "Velom." So harei hatarnu kol hatzdadim. Oh, it says finally one more thing. Gam en ledamot hashirm lechise shel prakim. Remember that yesterday we spoke from the Masechet Shabbat in the discussion of this chapter 20 in the Mishnah that you could open a folding chair, collapsible chair or bed or the asla, the portable toilet seat that you could open on Shabbat, and it forms a sort of a tent with the poles and the leather in between. It says. En raya, it's not the same. You would have thought this is the same as an umbrella. If you open a collapsible chair, right, it's poles and leather on top. Why not the umbrella? It's the same thing. It says, "Hatam en asui latzel ulagen al shetachtav rak leshev al gabav." The difference there is that you don't use it for shade. You open it and you sit on top of it, but you don't use the space underneath. And one might argue the definition of the tent is something that you put yourself underneath it and not above it. Even though one of the objects that is mentioned there in the Mishnah is a bed, and with the bed, when you open it, you could argue that you could use both the space on top and the space at the bottom. So just interesting how this seemingly innocent device, the umbrella, solicits so much discussion. And just recently, an acquaintance of mine, a professor in Israel, who's an inventor and a patent attorney, invented a new umbrella, not for Shabbat purposes. It's for especially for the modern generation. People need to keep on texting and using the phone, right, while walking. So it's sort of a wearable umbrella. You put a hat.
Right.
Did you see it? It's like a square. It's a big square. It's like those collapsible tents that you have for kids, the pop-up tent. So it's a pop-up square that you put on top of your head. And now we're looking into he's looking into that to see if it's halachically kosher for Shabbat. It seems like like with the umbrella, the knee-jerk reaction of the rabbis would be intuitively to say it's forbidden. Now, after the Rabbi Israel Lipschitz listed 6 arguments against the umbrella, which I only read 5 of them. One is too detailed of the discussion of purity and impurity. He says this, Af al pichen, despite all the things I said, nirali de sharei midina. I think that by law, according to halacha, it is okay. Why? מדאמרינן נתם, טלית כפולה לא יעשה, פירש רש"י שלא ישלח הטלית על גבי דלת קונדסין בשבת. ואם היה כרוך עליה חוט או משיכה, מותר לנטותה. So the Mishnah says this, one cannot create a cover under a robe. Talit is not just a talit, it's any robe, any garment. So don't do this foldable garment on Shabbat. And Rashi explains, what does it mean? You cannot put this curtain, let's say, over 4 poles on Shabbat, just like the chuppah that I mentioned. It says, but if there was a string that put it together, you could do it. Meaning, Rashi says, if it was already attached to the poles, and you open it by pulling the string, it's okay on Shabbat because it's a device that is prepared from before Shabbat. And so some argued against it to say that means when there is a width of tefah 4 inches from before Shabbat, because that we already spoke about that if you have like the awning or a rolled cover that is a tefah wide and it's there before Shabbat, you can open it. So Rabbi Lipschitz says this doesn't work with that kind of device. It's definitely not wide enough to have that. Again, long discussion.
But you could ask also the question of.
So he really goes in length to discuss this whole issue of the of the talit that can be pulled with a string, he says it seems that the conditions that were mentioned before are dependent on each other. Meaning, when you speak about a width of 4 by 4 at the top of the tent, it only applies when the walls go all the way to the ground. So he says, yes, one by one you could reject the arguments that were mentioned, but when you put them all together, the umbrella doesn't have enough elements to make it into something which is forbidden on Shabbat. He says because it's the walls are hanging, the umbrella is a device that is ready from before Shabbat, and you just open it with the pull of a string or a spring inside. And it's like I said, oil arai. It's temporary, definitely not 8 or 9 days. Even.
Okay, I have a quick question. Why doesn't it automatically fall into davar shelo mitkaven? In other words, you're not intending to.
No, davar shelo mitkaven is when one of your action creates another action, but here your action is one action. You open, right. Okay. And he says, so it must be eventually only a rabbinical, even if you try to make it forbidden, the prohibition would only be rabbinical. בדרבנן שומעים להקל, ובפרט במצטער מגשמים, במקום צערה לא גזרו רבנן. He says the rabbis created fences, but they only insisted on following them when it doesn't cause people damage or discomfort. And he says because people suffer because of the rain, במקום צערה לא גזרו רבנן. In the case of suffering, the rabbis did not insist on that decree. גם במקום פסדה lo gazru rabanan. Also, when it causes losses, the rabbis did not insist on their prohibition. And here, if one will not use an umbrella, he's going to be completely wet. So people argue today. You have what is called the sheina coat, the thin plastic coat. Yes, for some people it works. Some people don't feel comfortable with that, especially when you're in the East Coast in the summer, and there are high temperatures and strong rains, and you walk with that raincoat, and it's unbreathable. It's really, if you have a long walk, you come to shul all wet, dry on the outside, wet on the inside. So it's not kavod. It says gam gadol kavod habriot lelech bebgadim melukhlachim. It's disrespectful for people, etc. So that is his conclusion. And he says that even the Gaon of Vilna, Gaon Rabbeinu Leah Vilna, matir kol shvut kedarko bimkom tzara. He says when there is a kind of a discomfort, any rabbinical prohibition, even if it's kedarko, it's okay to do that. He then quotes the Rabbi Heskel Landa of Prague, who says that if you carry this on Shabbat, hoshesh leisur skila, one might be liable to be punished, even if the Bet HaMikdash existed and the rabbinical court, to have the capital punishment, sentenced to death by stoning. So you see, stoning is not that far. And he says, "B'mchilat kavodo ifriz ala midah." He says, with all due respect, he exaggerated. There's no way to go there. His conclusion that is still a long discussion, but it says so far we've seen that he holds that it's okay to use an umbrella on Shabbat. He brings all the possible arguments against it, and then piled all the other arguments in favor. And he says there's not enough. We don't have enough elements of a tent in an umbrella to make it forbidden, especially if you add to it the problems of suffering, discomfort, etc.
Who is this?
That's Rabbi Israel Lipschitz, who wrote the famous Tiferet Israel on the Mishnayot and Yachinu Boaz, and this is the introduction called Kalkalat Shabbat.